Kristin Stevens, Executive Editor at International Living, and your host for our roundtable focused on the question, what is the best way to go overseas? Let me begin by saying that I imagine I am not the only person out there who has said out loud more than once in the last few years, what the heck is happening in this country? But when you combine sort of that worry about what's going on at home with a love of travel and an interest in other cultures, considering what a more international life might look like, it makes a lot of sense. And so whether that's to spend part of the year in another country or to go full time or to invest abroad to diversify your portfolio, you have a lot of options overseas today and lots of ways and places that you can create a life for yourself that plays to your preferences. I think a lot of folks feel sort of stuck in the lives that they have, and they're really going to sort of take whatever the world dishes out to them in 2024 and just make the best of it. But we are here today on this roundtable to talk about options that can expand your future, right? Options that can hand you a better life. That might include a second citizenship if having a life raft for yourself and your kids and their kids, feels important to you. Maybe you are worried about your investments and an inflationary climate, holding real estate overseas, particularly when you buy it in the right place and in the right way, that can provide a real hedge against inflation. Perhaps you're worried about whether your nest egg will hold out over the long term. The good news is there are plenty of places on this planet where your retirement income will stretch much further than it would at home. So over the next hour, we're going to talk about all those kinds of options. So let me introduce my guests here today. First, we have Kristin Wilson from Traveling with Kristin, who's our Go Overseas mentor here at International Living. Hi, Kristin.
Hi, Jen. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here today.
We have also Jason Holland, and who is an expat based in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, who's our roving Latin America correspondent here at IL. Hi, Jason.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. And then last but very much not least, we have Glenda Cole, who's a longtime member and friend of International Living, who is an expat based on the Algarve in Portugal. So Glenda, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Obrigada.
All right, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about sort of timing. Kristin, I'll direct this at you first. Why is right now a good time to be looking at your options overseas?
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, it's never been a better time to go overseas. I've been living in different countries myself for the past 20 years, and it's just been getting easier and easier as technology has advanced and the cost of travel has gone down, whereas the cost of living in the US has gone up. And so you can really get more for your money overseas, especially now that the dollar is very strong. I'm really enjoying that almost parity with the euro over here in Europe, as last time I was living over here, it was a lot more expensive. So you've got that, you've got technology making it really easy to stay connected with people back at home. I remember walking over to payphones and using calling cards during my first years abroad with very slow internet or no internet at all. And these days, we have iPhones, we have FaceTime, we have apps. And so that makes it really easy to stay connected. And then also with budget travel, you can go back to visit friends and family really often. It's also just a time that, you can really be yourself and choose your place in the world. And that might not necessarily be where you're from or where you were born. So, and you can also see the world through other people's eyes and get the perspectives of other people who are living in different countries, especially like Jason and Glenda here, and kind of compare and contrast the type of experience you want to have before you get there. So that makes it a lot easier and more secure to make the right decision versus before, when it was kind of a mystery of what would happen once you got there.
Right. No, that makes very good sense. Glenda, I want to ask you a sort of related question. I think your experience, your motivation for going abroad is probably going to resonate with people tuning in here. Can you share a little bit about your own story? What made you want to look overseas for a better life when you did it?
Well, it's sort of a scary story because I was consumed by my corporate career, right? I'm sure other people out there are in the same shoes right now, but I was living for deadlines. My calendar was literally in 15-minute increments. And the stress was overwhelming. I said my epitaph is going to be that she left one meeting early to be at the next one late. And I thought it's going to consume me. So I lived in those days for my vacations, right? And you can identify with that, Jen, just back. It's just, you cannot wait for it to happen. And then when it's over, you're overwhelmed. But a couple times a year, I would vacation once. My son and I would go on crazy adventure boy trips all over the world. And then once a year, I'd go with my close group of friends. And we did a lot of barging in Europe. And houseboating is what they call it, barging here. And what a beautiful way to sort of see how people lived, see the small towns. And I was just in love. So when I was living that insane corporate lifestyle and I'd have these moments of beauty, I'd think, is this dream ever possible for me? That was my dream in life. And here I sit.
That's great. That's great. Jason, you have lived overseas for a good number of years now. You're in Mexico today, but you were in Costa Rica before that and reporting. If people tuning in have been members of International Living for any amount of time, you would have remembered Jason writing for us from Costa Rica before you moved to Mexico. But why do you feel like now is a smart time for folks to be considering their options, whether it's for living or investing abroad? Because I know you've been doing some reporting with Ronan about investing too. So maybe you could talk a little bit about both sides of those things, lifestyle and the money side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just, in general, as everybody's been saying, it's never been easier to move abroad. There's just so many tools and, there's like a path kind of laid out for you in a lot of locations, the most appealing locations, especially. So it's easy to kind of make that move and kind of integrate yourself into a new life. I think the other part is, we're coming out of the pandemic. The way we kind of live and work has really changed a lot. Remote work has become an option for so many people, or, people are just have started working online. And so with all the great internet you can get pretty much around the world, it's never been easier to, not have to wait necessarily until you're retired. You can go right now. So no matter what you're doing, see if you could transition to a remote work situation and try out, life abroad. And I think, the problem is, the longer you wait, some things can happen, some circumstances in your life could change that you can't make that move. And in terms of investment, even the conditions on the ground where you want to go to could change as well. I think prices could rise. It could become even more popular than when you visited. So maybe you wouldn't be able to afford to buy the place that you want in some of these locations because people are flooding in, the price, demand's going up, the prices are going up. So, you don't necessarily want to wait until things like that happen, circumstances in the world, that location or your own life change. So the sooner you do it, the better. Of course, you don't want to go totally unprepared and just, head first without checking the depth of the water, so to speak. And that part is scary to make those kinds of decisions. But, folks watching this, folks, reading International Living, they're doing the right thing. They're doing their research. They're kind of getting to know these different locations around the world. Setting the stage for what I recommend is, a scouting trip, checking out these places firsthand. And then when you're ready, hopefully sooner rather than later, you can go ahead and make that move to your kind of dream location that you picked out. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, and I would point out too, and related to that is the fact that lots of countries, to your idea of this people's ability to work remotely, countries have figured that out too. It's not just the people who figured it out; the countries have figured it out, and so they've created paths, legal paths for people to come and work, and not necessarily just retire in the countries. Because for lots of years here at International Living, and we've been around since 1979, and we focused in large part on retirees, places you can retire abroad, in part because that's where you could get a visa, right? It was relatively easy. Countries were happy to have you come and be a retiree and spend your money there. You're not going to take a job from somebody else. And so they were happy to give you a legal path to residency. But it was harder if you were younger and you were going to work. Now countries have figured out, well, we could take the money from these younger people and let them continue having their regular jobs while they're, and just spend their money here with us. And so that has really opened up lots of options for people, to your point. And I know one place that it's super easy to do that right now is, well, actually, there's lots of places it's super easy. Mexico, I'll just point out, since you're there, Jason, that's a 120-day visa as a tourist. Basically, you can come and stay for longer periods without having to even jump through any sort of visa hoops if you don't want to. And that kind of, I think countries are figuring out that they need to start other countries are figuring out that they're starting to create little paths like that for people as well. France is talking about a visa, 6-month visa for people who own property, foreigners who own property there. So I think that whole climate is beginning to change, and that is going to encourage other people to come. So to your point, I think sooner rather than later is probably a good idea. I've never, in all of the almost 30 years that I've been working with international living, I've never heard an expat say they wish they'd waited. Everybody says, I wish I'd done it earlier. Why did I wait so long? Right. So kind of along that lines, the dollar is, relatively, as you said, Kristin, relatively strong today. And that certainly makes life more affordable overseas because your dollars just buy you more, right? But beyond that benefit, there are plenty of other benefits that make spending time abroad enjoyable. And Kristin, you are currently based in the UK, but you've lived and traveled in more than 60 countries. Can you talk a little bit just about sort of what are some of the benefits of living abroad, just generally? Why should people be thinking about it at all?
Oh gosh, Jen, there's so many benefits, as you mentioned, and now is a really great time because of all the different digital nomad and remote work visas as well for non-retirees to be able to go abroad. I was really fortunate to stumble into this lifestyle as a 20-something-year-old studying abroad, which really opened my eyes to all of those benefits. And I think for me, starting out, it was really this change in my perspective on life and in my country and on my worldview. There's been a lot of research over the years that comes out that says experiences are more valuable than things. And that really directly conflicts with the narrative in the US that's consumption and, buying material things. And so one of the things that I noticed when I lived abroad was it's like the benefits that you get from travel, but magnified, right? And so you're just getting so many new experiences, getting that real world education. And that's something that you can only get when you're like literally out of your comfort zone and out of your country. And then secondary to that is probably the quality of life, just in all aspects, in just daily life and having a choice of where you want to focus your attention rather than having so many things kind of thrown at you in your face on billboards, on the news and the media, and even just everyday things like the quality of the food that you eat, the pace of life in other countries. It's something that never gets old, and I value it so much. And even this morning, I woke up to like 5 long text messages from my mom complaining about the bad quality of the food in the US and things that she's bought in the grocery store lately that just didn't seem like real food, and the ingredients and everything like that. And I was like, well, it's strawberry season here and everything tastes great over in the UK. And like the food is very affordable and very fresh. And it's actually so fresh that it goes bad within a day or two. And, we don't see that in the US. So I just feel like overall, my stress level goes down a lot when you go abroad. You're not so exposed to the rat race and the keeping up with the Joneses. And that really gives you time to invest in other things. It could be in hobbies. It could be learning a new language. It could be just simply living your best life, carpe diem and immersing yourself in that culture. And then it's also the people that you meet. It's the people that you meet in everyday life. It's a way to really grow the number of friendships that you have. And it goes over from your personal network into your professional network as well. You're just really expanding your horizons, meeting lots of people, learning so much. And I think depending on how long you go and stay abroad, it can really take a lifetime to process all of those new experiences. So when you do make that move overseas, it's kind of like starting over, but starting over with all of the life experience that you have to date and being able to reinvest that into what you like and what makes you happy. So it's really, there's so many intangible things on top of the tangible benefits, like the lower cost of living and the better exchange rate and the stronger dollar and things like that. It's just, more people, more places, more experiences. And, 20 years into this lifestyle, I'm still so grateful for it every day.
That's great. And we were talking actually before we all hopped on here to go live, just about sort of generally the crazy politics in the US today, and how those of you overseas, I just got back from Italy and I'm in the States, and I just said like, oh, I came in hot coming home. Like it was just been a crazy few days since I got home, and you guys were like, yeah, it's kind of nice being overseas. We just, you can be aware of the politics and what's going on, but it is not so consuming. And yeah, I've got a lot of people renting space in my brain right now that I feel like don't need to be in there. So that's a nice benefit. Glenda, on that point, you're in Portugal, and we already kind of talked about what motivated you to go. But what do you appreciate most, kind of like coming off of what Kristin said, what do you appreciate most about your day-to-day life abroad today?
It is such a beautiful life, and it's really about choices, but every day it's the simple, beautiful things. I mean, Kristin mentioned the food is amazing, but just going to buy the food is a blast. Going to the grocery store is like, this is the most fun ever. I did it this morning. Going to the butcher, that's a family-run place. They're helping me with my Portuguese. I want a leg of lamb and they pull it out on a hook. It's really amazing. And you go home with this great food, and wow, the bill was a pittance of what you pay in the US. So, there's those daily experiences. When I go for a walk these days, I don't walk around the block. I walk on the cliff with the beautiful beach and below me and the ocean waves and other cliffs sprinkled all over here on these secluded beaches. That's a daily occurrence. It's not my vacation, right? And then there's the unique things that are available here. So I'm in an expat club, and last week we threw a Hawaiian luau and I taught hula dancing to a bunch of people. What a blast, and I love the sausage festival that happens every year, and the sweet potato festival and carnival. And I'm going to a boat show this weekend. Yeah, I'm just spoiled for choice. And every day it's the little beautiful things that you do all the time. And then there's all that fun stuff that you can choose to do as much or as little as you want. It's a beautiful life.
Yeah. You're painting a compelling picture there, I gotta tell you.
Come on.
We can see the sun coming in southern Portugal. A somewhat related question, Jason, let's talk about healthcare overseas. And I'm going to kind of bring this around to all of you maybe, because I know this is something that is a real sticking point for people, right? They're encouraged about the idea of going overseas, but then you start thinking about the practicalities of it, and it gets you stuck. One of the things that sticks people there is healthcare. So I know I realize, Jason, you can't speak to every country, but can you just talk a little bit about your experience with the healthcare system in Mexico, just to give people an example?
Yeah, sure. And I'll just say at the beginning that Mexico is like actually a lot of countries in Latin America and Europe and elsewhere that do have government-run healthcare systems, public healthcare that's available free or low cost to citizens and residents. And there's also private healthcare options as well. So that's basically like a lot of countries. But, in Mexico in particular, I'll tell you about private care first. There are, very highly regarded hospitals, medical centers, and clinics kind of all over the country. Mexico is a large country, lots of large cities of millions of people that many people are actually not aware of. That's another point. But anyway, they all have these great hospitals, a lot of them accredited by Joint Commission International, which is like the highest standard in international medicine. There are specialists of every discipline. They have all the latest equipment. They're familiar with all the latest techniques. Mexican doctors are great. Lots of folks from the US actually come into Mexico to use private healthcare to get lower cost surgeries and, cosmetic surgery, knee replacements, extensive dental work is much more affordable in Mexico than in the US, and very affordable. So with those private kind of clinics and doctors that you might see, you could pay cash, out of pocket. And for, little things, it's very affordable. Like, I take my son to see a pediatrician, and it's like, 1,000 pesos, which is depending on the exchange rate, but, between $50 and $60. See a specialist, you'll pay a little bit more. We've had private doctors do house calls, and, they would just, hey, we're having this issue. Okay, I'll come over. And he pops over in his motorbike, and he's got his bag with all this stuff. He, does some tests and, all exam, and they just throw in another $10 on top of the bill to pay for that, for the house service. You can get insurance though, as well, if you don't want to pay cash, because even though it's a lot cheaper, a surgery, a hospital stay is still going to run in the thousands of dollars in Mexico if you're paying cash. So you do have the option of insurance. You can get, private insurers that are based in Mexico You can also get, international policies that will cover you in Mexico, pretty much everywhere in the world except the United States, and it's actually pretty affordable. They live the US out of that, of course, because of our high healthcare costs there. Generally with these private insurers, what you have to watch out for is age and pre-existing conditions. So they might not cover you depending on what your situation is, so that's something to think about. But Mexico does have actually great public healthcare as well. And there are actually two systems. There's one called IMSS, which is basically Mexican Social Security. This is for people who are employees of companies in Mexico. They pay into the system, and there's a network of clinics and hospitals and doctors' offices and testing labs all over the country. As a legal residents of Mexico, whether you're a temporary or permanent residents, you can pay an annual fee. For somebody who's age 60 to 69, I just looked this up the other day, it's about $800 a year, something, give or take, something like that, to cover you. And that's your medications, any surgeries you need, doctor's visits, all that sort of thing. Unfortunately, there also is a pre-existing condition exclusion for this particular system. So if you have certain serious, like a heart condition or something like that, they might not let you in the system. Or you have like a 3-year waiting period where you're kind of being vested into the system, and anything related to that existing condition might not be covered. It's a little more complicated, when you have that sort of thing going on. Then there's a system called INSABI, which is really designed for any Mexican citizen who cannot be covered by any other healthcare system in Mexico. Maybe they don't have the resources or the type of job required. So the care is completely free. You just kind of show up at a clinic or a hospital, an emergency room, and you just get let in. They're triaged, it's serious cases going first. And even as a legal resident, an expat legal resident in Mexico, you can use this system as well. You just show up with your residence card, and you're in. You don't no need to pre-register. I'll just tell you a quick story. I've had some personal experience with the healthcare system here, and this is actually about the INSABI system, the free healthcare system, which my neighbor, who's an expat lady from the US who lived around the world for like 40, 50 years. She has legendary stories, but that's for another time. She slipped on some tile during a heavy rainstorm, and she basically broke her arm, and she had an open fracture. And so it was raining out. I said, okay, Joyce, hop in my truck. We're going to go to the ER. Took her in, and the place was packed. It was a Friday night, and the place was just packed with people. The triage nurse saw, my neighbor, and she said, "Oh, that's very serious. Let's go." And I kind of went back to act as her translator, and I was kind of helping her out. So I got to see up close and personal what was going on. So it wasn't fancy in this kind of free clinic, situation, free hospital situation, but there were, doctors and nurses everywhere, people taking good care of people. And that's what happened to my neighbor. Within an hour, she was in surgery. They did an x-ray. They got an orthopedic surgeon to come out, and she did an overnight hospital stay. And because this was part of the free system, she didn't have to pay anything. It was completely free. And she even got free follow-up care after as well. So I've seen the private system, I've seen the public system, and I think they do good work here in Mexico as far as healthcare. So.
All right. Thank you. That was great. Good example. And I think, I know just from Glenda, talking to you and others as well, that sounds pretty typical of other countries too. Kristin, I know you, because you've gone around, to lots of places. Can you talk a little bit about generally what some of their options might be for health insurance or health care? Because I know you've spent like long periods of time in different countries. So like, what do you do? You know what I mean? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, as Jason mentioned, there's a lot of different options. What I recommend a lot to my relocation clients is that they keep the insurance that they're comfortable with, at least for the first year that they're abroad, just in case they have to fly back home for something. And then you can kind of transition into a different system. As Jason mentioned, if you get residency or citizenship, you can qualify for the public health care in different countries, but there's also private insurance that both locals and expats will have as well. I've done all different things. Like I've had US insurance some years whenever I was in the US more than others. But if I was out of the US, then I would do an international healthcare plan. So you can actually get a private international health insurance coverage that can cover you in pretty much any country. So that's good for if you're changing countries like me and moving around. I also did private health insurance when I was living in Costa Rica. And I've also keep a emergency travel insurance policy. That's like an annual plan that I have. But I also pay out of pocket for a lot of things. So if it's the dentist or just a checkup, as Jason mentioned, it's pretty affordable, like only $50 or $60 for a regular doctor's visit. And you can also get really good care. Like I have my doctor's cell phone numbers and WhatsApp, and that would be unheard of in the US. It's just a lot different when you go in to get care as well, unless you're in the ER and it's very rushed. But I've noticed that there's like a less volume, like quantity of patients there. So you don't feel like you're just on a conveyor belt to go in and get checked over by the nurse practitioner for 2 minutes before the doctor comes in for another 2 minutes, and then you're on your way. So I have felt like it's a lot different abroad, but you can get look into those international insurance plans, as well as private health insurance if you're going to be living in a country long term. And then if you are applying for residency or citizenship, also looking at that public healthcare option.
Right. Okay. Great.
But there's a reason that medical tourism exists, and it's
right.
because you can get really good care in other places.
Yeah. And we just ran a story, I think it was this month. I can never remember what month the story is running in International Living, but I think it's this month's magazine has a story about medical tourism. And that if you haven't read it, if you're tuning in, you haven't read it, go read it, because it's got lots of good information about how to do it and where to go and what things cost and that kind of stuff. Glenda, do you have anything to add to that we haven't said, just about your experiences? Or
I would say being retired, it is different. I will make a note, though, that I just, on the very excited, I just found in Portugal that there is one insurance company, and it's about the same cost as what I'm paying now, that does cover pre-existing conditions, which is almost unheard of anywhere. So I'm about to switch in a few months. When I'm able to, I'm going to switch over to that one, and then maybe I can report on whether or not it's true. But everyone says that it actually does. It's designed specifically for expats. So a lot of retirees have pre-existing conditions, and it will be terrific. I think it's called Medal, MEDAL.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we'll keep track of that. And if it works out, let us know, and we will have you write a story for International Living. Stay tuned, everybody. Let's talk next just a little bit about part-time living, because I think that's something a lot of people are interested in doing, particularly folks that find themselves sort of sandwiched between, like, the kids are gone, but the older parents are getting even older, and you're in this little, maybe in some ways a sweet spot, right? They could go, but they maybe don't want to go full time. Kristin, I'll stick with you here just for a minute, since you've done lots of these longer stints in countries and you've helped lots of folks figure out part-time escapes overseas. What are some of the things that people need to think about if they're looking for a part-time escape? What's your guidance there?
Well, first you want to check where you can go. So matching up the places that you want to go with the visa requirements, if there are any, or how long you can stay with your passport, because with short stays, you likely won't be applying for residency somewhere. Another big consideration is what to do with any carrying costs or assets that you have back in the US. So if you own a home or a car or both, if you have monthly expenses, like subscription expenses that you can't cancel, then you will need a separate budget for just monthly bills back in the US, like a mortgage, your internet contract, your car payment, things like that. And so that can make the cost of living abroad higher, because instead of eliminating those expenses back home, you're just reducing them slightly and then adding travel costs on top. So it's really important to think about, what you would want to do with your house. Would you want to just, kind of lock and leave it? Would you want to do home swapping with other travelers? Luckily, technology has given us a lot of options now. So you can rent your house out long term. You can do Airbnb, different types of vacation rentals, and kind of do it all remotely now, because you can have, automated locks on your doors. You could have cleaning teams come in. And so a lot of people do decide to do that. I've also done that as well. But if you don't own and you're renting, then you would want to think about, okay, timing your 3 months abroad or 6 months or whatever it is, with when your apartment or your house rental agreement will be up. So then you might have some monthly storage costs, but it won't be as much because you can, cancel other sorts of bills that you have. And there's also really interesting housing options now in the US. There's a company called Landing where you can rent fully furnished apartments throughout the United States, and you can do it on a monthly contract. So, or like month to month, there's no annual contracts or anything. So once you do get out of a long-term lease, or if you sell your house or something like that, you can always have a place to come back to, maybe store your most important stuff, downsize your belongings, and then live in one of these, hundreds of cities now that have these sort of flexible leases that are built for people who are working remotely or who want to have some type of flexible living. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no,
that's
absolutely.
a big consideration.
Absolutely. And I mean, to sort of add on to your point there too, even if you're looking to go somewhere and part-time, maybe the part-time is just for 6 weeks or something like that. Like maybe it's almost more of an extended travel experience. There's so much we can do. We write about this in International Living. People, I think, be familiar with it. Like even the idea of house sitting, right? Get somebody to house sit your house and then you go house sit somebody else's in another place. And those can actually extend longer than, just a few weeks. They could be 2 months or 3 months, that kind of thing. But I think you're right. It really, the internet has changed this math, like the what people are able to do in huge ways when it comes to arranging for travel and overseas living. It's made it amazingly easier than it was 20 years ago.
Definitely.
So Glenda, you're full-time in Portugal, but you take a few weeks break every year and you travel and you come back to the States. And that I know, because we've chatted about it, that you use that to help kind of cover the costs of some of your place in Portugal. Could you just talk a little bit about what your strategy is there? Because I think that might be of interest to people.
Yes, it is amazing actually to me. So I actually spent 2 months out of the house, July and August, because when I came here, I discovered that the Algarve, southern Portugal, is known for the summer, and everyone from northern Portugal to other Europeans and expats from all over the world vacation here. So the rentals are kind of amazing. So I rent my place in July and August. And in July, I buzz around Europe, which is great, right? And it funds all of that. And then I spend the whole month of August back in the States. And that 8-week, 9 weeks sometimes of rentals funds the trip to the States and my fun in Europe in July.
Nice. Yes, I like it. That sounds very savvy of you.
I'll tell you what, it more than funds that. It stuns me. I rent it by the week, and it also pays some of the mortgage. Not only does it fund 2 months of fun, but it's kind of unbelievable, the rentals here.
I think Ronan does that too.
Mm-hmm. Ronan, right? I was just going to say, Ronan McMahon, our real estate expert who's at the helm of Real Estate Trend Alert, he talks about that. One of the places he has is a place that he bought really purely for personal use in Portugal on the Silver Coast and on the West Coast, and he didn't buy that because he expected it to make him a ton of money, but he rents it out for 10 weeks a year, and those 10 weeks cover 100% of the annual mortgage and all of his golf fees for the whole year. I'm like, that's crazy, right? And he said, I didn't intend it to do that. I liked this place as like a home for us. We decided we were gonna, if as long as it wasn't a huge suck, we had to live somewhere. And there you go, cover. So it's a pretty savvy strategy, and it's something we'll talk more about in the next few minutes here. Let's talk about cost of living abroad, because as everybody has said, that is one big draw. One big reason that you might consider going overseas. And not just that the cost of living in the right places can be lower, but you pair that with a higher quality of life. And you guys have kind of touched on that already. But Jason, let's talk about your life in Mexico. And if you want to talk about Costa Rica too, that's fine. But give us some concrete examples of how your expenses compare to what people are paying in the US.
Yeah, it's been like a while since I really sat down and crunched the numbers and added everything, our monthly budget, what it would be like in both places. But I do know that every time I do visit the US to see family, friends, and that sort of thing, I start getting upset like the first day if we go out to breakfast or lunch or we have dinner somewhere. And then I'm looking at the bill and I'm like, we're 4 people and we just spent how much? Like no, I can't, and because in Mexico, it would be half that price, and, a lot of what we enjoy in Mexico is that we get to just go out to dinner. We get to have all these fun experiences, and we don't feel like we're shelling out money, hand over fist. It's just very affordable. And I think we have a more luxurious life, if you want to say, for what an ordinary life kind of costs in the US, and is one way to put it as well, because
Right.
you can certainly get luxury in Mexico and Costa Rica and different countries, but you pay much less, and so you kind of get used to the finer things, maybe is the side effect of that. But as far as other things, we rent here in Mexico, and for what we have, which is a 3-bedroom townhouse in a gated community with swimming pool, fitness center, tennis courts, 24-hour, guarded access, nice place. And we're paying about 1,600 US. Every time I look at something similar in, say, Florida or California, you're talking about minimum double, but most likely $5,000, $6,000 a month, for these types of places. So I think, not every place is comparable, but I think definitely for sure, as far as, renting a place overseas, including Mexico, Costa Rica, so much more affordable than anything, in the US. And that goes for real estate to buy as well. When you compare what a, beach condo in, Playa del Carmen, Mexico would cost, something that you could look out of your balcony and see the ocean or the Caribbean, walk a block, have your toes in the sand, walk another block another way, and be at a totally cool, fine dining restaurant with, cool stuff going on, and so much entertainment and things to do. You're paying like a third or a half or a quarter of in Mexico of what you would pay in a similar kind of fun beach community, anywhere in the US. So real estate definitely a lot more affordable. And just, daily cost of living stuff, going to the grocery store, getting a haircut, getting a car fixed, going out to dinner, is all much cheaper in Mexico than any, what we pay in the US. One example I like to give is a dozen roses here costs about $2. So I very often bring flowers home, so I'm very romantic,
Frugal and romantic. It's impressive.
Exactly. I have some pocket change, and I'm walking by the flower guy, and I'm like, oh, I'll get a bouquet, head home. And that's just a little example. I mean, but I think definitely you have a great quality of life here for a much more affordable price than back in the US. So.
All right. And Glenda, you've sort of found the same thing to be true in Europe too. I know that people, I think, often assume that Europe is just too expensive because maybe they've taken a package trip to Paris or something like that. And, if you're going to be staying in expensive hotels in an expensive city, life's going to be expensive. But the general day-to-day life for everyday living in Europe can be extremely affordable. So can you talk a little bit about sort of what your typical expenses have been and just to give us another point of reference?
Well, I will say that I am living very large. So when Jason talked about luxury living, I will say I'm living it. I'm living in a 5-bedroom or 4-bedroom, 5-bathroom villa on a golf course. I can see the ocean out there right now, and it is stunning. I tell my friends I would be living in the servants' quarters of this place if I was living in the US. I could never afford it. Here, I have this stunning villa. It really is beautiful. I have my own pool. And I was in it today. It is absolutely gorgeous. With this living comes a gardener, a pool guy, a HOA fees for the course, maintaining what we would call HOA fees and all of that. So I'm living extremely large, and my expenses all told, I mean, my car insurance is $40 a month. I like that little thing that just blows me away, but all told, I'm living at about $3,200 a month. And I just did an episode for International Living and talked about how you could live in different areas here on your average Social Security costs. So yeah, you can live like a queen here for this and live. It's just, I amaze myself every day that I'm living here like this. Or you can live really cheaply, really beautiful. It's not just that you're living so much cheaper, it's you're living a more beautiful life.
Yeah, we just, if you've been following your Sunday Digest, I've been writing about our trip in Italy the last few weeks, and I was really amazed. We have 3 kids who are 3 boys between the ages of 17 and 22, which is to say they eat a lot, right? There's a lot of food being consumed in our household, but we were going out to dinner. So we were being tourists. We were not trying to be frugal. This was like a big trip. And we went out to a very nice place in San Gimignano, which is just lovely mountain town in Tuscany. again, very touristy. We were staying in town. So we went to this wonderful, I mean, a very nice meal. And I like to eat and I like to drink nice wine. And like, I'll do that in the States, but this meal for all of us, it had this huge, I mean, just massive amounts of food, 2 bottles of excellent wine. We had cocktails before. The whole thing was about $300. I mean, I can't even, it would be easily, I would say, between $6,000 and $1,000 in the US. And that would have been, you would have thought, well, that's not bad considering 5 of us just ate, right? So it was unbelievably affordable. I was shocked and thrilled. I mean, it was great. We did it for weeks. It was fabulous. But anyway, you're right. You can just get a lot more and better living, I think. One point I would like to point out here, make is that I think there are so many different ways that a person can arrange their life so that it's more international. You can do what Kristin's doing and spend months at a time in different places. You guys, the other 2 of you, you're both overseas, but Glenda, you're spending some time back in the States each year. I mean, you're kind of doing it in lots of different ways. So, we came here to talk about, what's the best way to go overseas? But I hope that the message we're kind of sharing with everybody here is that there isn't one perfect way to do it. It all kind of depends on what your priorities are and your budget and what you like, what you don't like. If you take all of those factors into consideration, though, you can find a place that really works for you. And in many of the places that we talk about here in international living, a couple can live well for, as little as $1,700 a month. And if you have, Glenda, to your point, $3,000 or $6,000 a month to spend, you can live genuinely lavishly. And in a lot of places we write about, you would actually be hard pressed to spend that much. I mean, you almost couldn't do it, right? So we talk about beach destinations and cities and small towns and cool weather places and places that are warm year round. And you've just got all of these different options. And, Kristin, you actually have a program that helps people figure out where they should go and how to do it. So I'm going to ask this question of you. What are a couple things that people should be thinking about first as they begin this exploratory journey? If I'm just excited about this and like the world's my oyster, what are the first things I need to kind of get my ducks in a row? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about all the different ways that there are to live abroad or have a more flexible international lifestyle. And so where I start with my clients is always focusing on each person personally, because what this lifestyle looks like is different for everyone. And it is a very special time in history that we have the option to do this, to elect where we want to live in the world. And if you've reached a point in your life where you have that flexibility, embrace it. And so what I like to do is start with, why do you want to move abroad? So really thinking about the reasons that you want to move overseas, and that will lead you to Portugal or Mexico or England or wherever that is in the world. And it can be really easy to get distracted by what everyone else is doing and, reading blogs and watching videos. So really just try to tune out, the noise and the content for a little while and really focus on what you want and what are your reasons for moving. Is it getting better health care? Is it specifically to find a place where you can live on your Social Security? Is it to pursue learning a foreign language or a certain hobby? Is it to change your climate? There's so many different reasons. So think about that first and, really lean into that and what you want, because it's not very often that you get the opportunity to really design your life. And that's what you're doing here. So that, and then also funding it is also really important. And, once you get abroad, you can save a lot of money, but there are going to be some startup costs. So it's never too early to start saving. And there can be some like one-time fees, plane tickets, security deposits, like unexpected expenses and things like that. So start saving now, and you can make it happen sooner than you think.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you for that. I think that will resonate with people. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, to that sorting through those options that you have can be it can be hard, because we talk about them every day in International Living. You talked about looking at blogs and videos, and we have our daily postcard and IL Magazine and IL TV and the podcast, and
and I make videos.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there's all of these videos, right? So figuring it out is not straightforward, but we strive to help you. We strive to get you excited about it in the pages of International Living every month and in all the rest of our resources. And we also, I'm just going to give a plug for this because I think I want people to understand that we have this coming up. We have our ultimate Go Overseas Bootcamp coming up in Denver in September. And that's kind of the next step. If you're excited and you are ready to really kind of focus and figure out what you want to do and where you might want to go, there's not a better way to get familiar with what your options are than to come to one of these events. This is our only one in the US this year. We are flying, we're flying all of our folks in from all around the world. All three of you guys will be there, along with literally hundreds of other experts that we are bringing in. So, Glenda, you actually, I thought I'd ask you about this because you came to one of our big events. You came to a couple events from International Living. Can you just talk a little bit about, share your story? You have said that you thought it was helpful in terms of giving you more focus and a plan. Can you just give people a sense for why it was useful?
Yeah, it was actually amazing. I will say I went to the Ultimate Boot Camp. It was the kind of same thing where you bring everybody in from all over the world. And that was the point where I knew I kind of wanted it, but it was this, my friends would humor me when I said, oh yeah, I'd really love to retire overseas. And people like, yeah, right, like you're going to do that. And I went to that event, and after I would pour over the magazine. Every month. It was just, I waited for it, and I loved the case studies, and I'd read about these people, living in other parts of the world. And they were like superheroes to me, but they weren't really real until I went to the event. And then I talked to these people. And I remember talking to the woman that was living in Europe that was at the event and wrote for you. And I remember thinking, this is my idol. But can I ever do this? And at the end of the event, a couple of days of taking copious notes, and I did spreadsheets at night in the hotel room because I'm such a nerd. And at the end, I walked away from that event thinking, wow, first I've learned things I never knew that I had to think about, like how do you get your mail overseas? There were great details, but it made it real. It turned the nebulous dream into, holy, I can do this. And I walked away with a plan and 5 countries that I chose to explore, and ended up, here I sit in Portugal, as really, truly, that was the turning point, knowing that and making it real from the dream.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I think too, for me, what I think is one of arguably the most valuable thing that this event brings people is our networking hall, which you get into free when you come to the event. It's part of the deal. And all of you guys and all of our other experts, they literally sit at tables and they wait for you to come up and talk to them. And they're very generous. It's really important to me that our folks, our speakers don't just sort of retreat to a green room when they're done. You know what I mean? It's not like that at all. We really do think of everybody kind of like a big family. And so we invite everyone who attends these programs to come and sit down with our people and talk to them, ask questions, see what's really what, right? And I think that's something that it's hard to get just from watching a video or even watching something like this. Like you can get excited, but it's different when you can sit down with your list of questions and say, okay, because I've got 5 questions for you, and have them give you their opinion. I also feel very strongly that it is facts and figures are one thing, but the really useful part of what we do is telling folks what to do with all that information, right? And so, the folks that we have writing for International Living, they are there to serve our readers. They're there to answer their questions and help them figure out what they want to do. And so that's a really valuable thing. And this year we have completely reimagined this program. And I just want to say, I'm super excited about it. I had a meeting about it earlier today. It's going to be very cool. We have, not invented, well, clearly didn't invent, but we have added these fireside chats that we're going to have several, 4 or 5 a day, that are going to take place just in a side room, and they're going to be focused on little topics that we know trip people up. So, what about bringing my pets? So I think, Jason, you're going to talk about, you're doing one about taking your pets. And we have another one about part-time living, or another one about how to plan an exploratory trip, and all these kind of little things that people, those niggling things that worry folks. We're going to get those answered for you in a very intimate way. We're going to have small groups, and so I'm super excited about that. And the other thing that's going to be kind of that's going to be nice this time is that we formatted the program a little differently. We'll have our big main stage with people giving talks about countries, but we're also going to have a whole bunch of roundtable discussions that are topic based, and let all our folks who are based in Latin America sit at a table and answer questions and kind of debate each other and talk a little bit. So it's a little bit easier to kind of maybe compare and contrast those different countries. So I'm excited about that. And we also will have Ronan McMahon, who very rarely comes to these live, like he hasn't been at one of our big events. It was because of COVID, mind you, but he's going to be on the ground. He's our real estate guy. So we are super excited about that too. He is bringing a huge team of developers and real estate agents, and sort of his contacts around the world are all kind of also descend upon this event with him as well. So that's going to be really powerful. I think it's going to give people just the contacts they need, because that's the other thing. You don't know who to trust abroad. Even if you're excited and you've kind of figured out where to go, it's hard to know. It's hard to know who to trust. So we will help with that as well. And reserve your place for our Denver program. That's September 2 to 4. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I can't wait.
All right.
Can't wait to see everybody.
Yeah, it was great. I really appreciate it. And I hope those of you tuning in will take that next step and think about not just where you'd like to go, not just think about it, but do something about it. Make this the year that you take a little action and come join us in Denver. We'd all like to see you. And if you do, come up and tell us that you saw us on this roundtable. We'd appreciate it. All right. So Glenda, Kristin, Jason, again, thank you all. And I'm Jen Stevens for International Living. I will see you next time.
Bye.
And there you have it, another episode of ILTV. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to hit the subscribe button below, turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos, and join me for next week's episode.